Good evening, listeners and viewers. It's 6:43 and it's time for the nation's business. I'm Chevon Campbell.
And I'm Ricardo Brooks.
Well, we are turning to transport this evening. Transport Minister Darrell Vaz says approval has been granted by Cabinet for the Montego Bay Metro to be subsumed under the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC.
Cabinet has approved for the Montego Bay Metro to be consumed by the JUTC. So we will be able to now focus taking in the Montego Bay Metro, for which we have 18 buses, 12 of them which are 2 years old. We are going to expand routes. Well, you see we're expanding routes, but in terms of even the Western Jamaica, based on the fact that we are dealing with a lot of school children now, but with the increase in tourism in that area, hotels, workers that need to be transported.
Darrell Vaz, there, the Minister of Transport. The move to not sell the entity follows considerations in May last year about privatizing the Metro. This was due to low ridership and maintenance challenges. The Montego Bay Metro was formed in 1997 to serve St. James, Hanover, Trelawney and Westmoreland.
The Metro received 12 additional units in August 2024, bringing its fleet to 18. Minister Vaz says the Montego Bay Metro will be expanding its services to Negril by March. And he joins us now, and we're also being joined by the Chairman of the Transport Authority, Owen Ellington. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening,
Mr. Ellington is also the acting managing director of JUTC, so he has a dual role. But in this particular case, he's in charge of the JUTC.
Yeah. Thank you, Minister. Let me start by asking then, Mr. Ellington, in terms of the profitability that you see from the subsuming of the Metro under the JUTC. Talk to us about that.
You know, we're really not looking at that issue of profitability because the services are subsidized. So what we are focusing on is delivering service which is reliable, consistent, safe, and affordable to the commuting public. And as you are well aware, much of the commuters that we transport are students, and they actually enjoy even a greater subsidy than adult passengers. But they, like I said, the focus is not on profit, but on delivering on the service, but doing it efficiently, which means managing our costs, cutting waste, and ensuring that value for money is generated.
I suppose to make the question a bit more specific then, in terms of the sustainability of the JUTC and the cost-cutting thrust, how does that factor in? Because ridership being low out in that region, how do you...
No, ridership is very high in Montego Bay Metro. In fact, even since we deployed the additional 12 buses late last year, ridership has increased tremendously. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the reports that we have been getting since deployment are showing marked increase in the number of students and adults who are riding it. In fact, what we are actually discussing now is expansion of the service based on additional demand for it to extend into new townships. So we do not have a problem in terms of ridership. What we have a problem
Ricardo,
is meeting demand for seats.
Let me come in at this point. So the fact of the matter is that we have gotten a number of new buses that were committed on and have been delivered. So, as I said before, since May 23, when I was appointed Minister of Transport, there were 50 buses that were in train from the previous minister.
Minister Vaz, are you there?
No, it seems you lost him.
Then let me... Minister, are you there?
You hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
No, I'm saying that we have gotten a number of new buses since I became minister in May 23. And that would be 50 buses that were in train before I became minister that were delivered when I became minister, and 125 since I became minister. So that's 175 new buses. We have another 100 buses that are in the final stages of procurement, hoping to go to Cabinet on Monday. That will arrive here by June, July of this year. So what we are doing is we are expanding services, but making sure that it's not at the detriment of the existing routes that were under pressure because of the lack of functional buses. So it's not about just expanding without thinking about the reduced wait times that we promised, which are being delivered. As you know, at some points we were waiting 2.5, 3 hours on a bus. We have clinically and strategically deployed new routes because of expansion of townships and expansions of areas in the Kingston, St. Andrew, and Spanish Town, Portmore areas. Bottom line is that we are under pressure, especially as it relates to rural kids getting to school. So this is kind of like a interim solution to ease the pressure until such time as the rural school bus is implemented. As it relates to Montego Bay Metro, which was separated and was an independent entity, we did an assessment which Mr. Ellington led the team to do a full assessment of what it is that Montego Bay Metro had in relation to fleet, in relation to resources, in relation to facilities, etc. And we realized that it was a duplication. And the fact is that if it was subsumed by JUTC, we could get more efficiency, and also we could cut costs significantly, because basically you had two sets of personnel, one at Montego Bay Metro, one at JUTC. With the reduced fleet over the years at JUTC, the bottom line is that we have staff that we can send to Montego Bay Metro, and we can restructure the entire Montego Bay Metro to make sure that we increase buses, increase routes, and increase efficiency and safety. So that is where we are now. And I must tell you that the response to the 12 buses that we sent down there, I can't remember, Owen, how many buses were working there at the time, but whatever it was woefully inadequate. And with the 12 and the 6 buses that are there now, it's amazing to see what 18 buses and the amount of people that 18 buses and the routes. We expanded the routes with the 18 buses. And we are now servicing Trelawney, St. James, Westmoreland, Hanover.
Yeah.
And we are hoping to go, to the Grill, which is obviously the western tip, and also into St. Elizabeth. The response in relation to the routes that we have done, which is the Maypen, St. Thomas, Old Harbour, etc.
Lionel Town.
Lionel Town. It's unbelievable, because the people were not getting reliable, efficient, safe services. As we know what happens on the streets every day, to be able to go about their lawful business and go to work, etc. So I must say that I am very, very pleased with where JUTC has reached, and this is just the start, with another 100 buses, plus the refurbishing of the buses that we are doing, plus the spare parts that we were able to buy to put additional buses on. Owen, what is our rollout now?
We're averaging 270.
And
that's in JUTC Central.
Right. And we're coming from what? 200?
200. Sometimes we could barely put out 200. So we're averaging 270 now. And we have buses that are under rapid refurbishing. We should be able to push out an additional 50 by year end from our existing stock, which does not include the anticipated 100, which will come from the procurement process. So we will have enough buses come year end to be able to project outward treating, providing services to some parishes that are not now getting it.
And bear in mind that the optimum amount of buses is between 450 and 500. That's what the studies show. So we really are making our mark. And you can see it when you see the buses on the road and you speak to the thing. I've done a few tours myself. I know Owen goes out almost weekly just to see what's happening on the ground, etc. And the reports that I get every morning and every evening during peak hour morning, peak hour evening. Unless they are giving me what I want to hear, which I doubt.
No, you'll be hearing from the commuters.
It's night and day. Yeah. And you know, Ricardo, the fact of the matter is that you don't hear the amount of complaints that you hear daily on the radio shows and social media everywhere. So you know that you're doing something right because they as I call it, the misery index, which I promised to reduce. I mean, I get WhatsApps daily from people complaining and making suggestions. But when I first came in, I would say that I would get maybe 20 messages a day of complaints from their various areas. And now, if I get 2 or 3, and maybe one of them is a suggestion, that's it. I mean, so you know, realistically, and not because people want to tell the minister what he wants to hear. There has been a significant improvement, and I must praise the former managing director who is on leave and the acting, plus the entire JUTC staff, because you know that JUTC is not an easy place.
Mm-hmm. Owen Ellington, part of the problem that has plagued the JUTC for a while now, for example, theft of the fuel. In some instances, there have been allegations that parts have been stolen, which obviously put the buses out of operation. What are some of the measures that you've taken? So I know obviously the reduction in diesel is predicated on the new buses, but what are some of the other measures that have been taken to try to stem that practice?
Before Owen comes in, I just want to say that he might not say it, so I want to say it now, that we are looking at the entire stock of parts that we have, which is hundreds of millions of dollars. A majority of which is dead stock. Stock that is, in other words, is not of use to the JUTC based on the age of the buses and the fact that most of those buses are not even roadworthy anymore. To try and get somebody outside of Jamaica who are still using buses to try and get rid of those parts, to be able to use that money to be able to rehabilitate and get the parts that are needed for the existing stock that is not rolling stock. Go ahead, Owen.
Yeah, I think I can, as simple as I can describe the efforts that we are making to stem the theft of diesel fuel, is the massive transition of the fuel mix away from diesel to renewables such as CNG and battery electric buses. So we have scaled down on diesel considerably. And in the case of those buses that are still using diesel, we do have problems of pilferage taking place. And, you know, rather than describing the measures that we are putting in place to stop it, I'd like to just issue a word of warning to those who are involved to stop and run away, because we start gathering a lot of good evidence already. Or if you intend to continue, enjoy what you're making out of it, because your days are numbered. I don't want to go into any more detail about that right now.
Spoken like a former top cop. But let me also ask you this.
A top cop with connections still in the force.
well, let me also
more so now than before.
Let me also ask you this, Owen Ellington. The terrain. So the Jamaicans are used to predominantly diesel-powered, buses, and so they ask the question: these new fancy buses coming in, can they manage the terrain, the roads? For example, some of them going up to West Rural, etc. Some now going all the way to St. Thomas. Can they manage our terrain? Has that been factored in terms of the buses we're getting in?
The terrain has been, one of the big challenges facing our buses, especially going up into rural St. Andrew, the above Rocks routes, Stony Hill, Lawrence, Tavern routes. Those have taken a heavy toll on our buses because the roads are narrow, they are steep, they are winding, and they are pothole riddled. So we do suffer a lot of damage to the bus furniture and suspensions, braking systems, etc. But for the urban area, the buses do pretty well because they are mainly city buses. And if you take the example of the buses going out to St. Thomas, we have first-class roads that they are driving on, so no problem. And those going out along the western corridor to Old Harbour, Clarendon, they are handling very well. Where we do have a bit of problem is where they go interland. For example, today we were in Chapelton, and there is a bit of challenge navigating some of the roads going up there. So, if we had much better road conditions, our buses would do much better. They would last much longer. They would suffer less damage. But we can also infuse into the system buses that are adapted to that kind of driving condition, because some of those road conditions will be with us for a long time.
Yeah.
So let me just come in. The fact of the matter is that there's a policy within the JUTC coming from Cabinet that any bus that we buy for Jamaica must be a tested bus. So we don't buy buses that are just manufactured for a particular region or a particular area, geographic area. When we test the bus, we spec the bus to make sure that the improvements we want are in the bus that we order, because our situation in Jamaica is much different. Our road conditions, our terrain, etc. But most importantly, if a bus is made and manufactured for 60 people, let us say 40 seated and 20 standing, we know in Jamaica that that bus that is supposed to have 60 people is going to have 80 people. And therefore, we spec it in terms of the suspension, in terms of the height off of the ground, all of the things that we know are what real life Jamaica, daily transportation happens, is what we do. So the bottom line is, to answer your question very clearly, our buses are spec'd for Jamaica real life conditions, and that gives you more durability and more life. The other thing is
hold the other thing. We're up on a time signal. Let's hold it for me, Minister.
GK1 now introduces third-party motor insurance from GK General Insurance. Download and log into the GK1 app, then select one of 3 affordable third-party options. The time by GK General Insurance is
7:01.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers. We're talking with the Minister of Transport, Darrell Vaz, regarding, well, we were talking about the subsuming of the Montego Bay Metro into the JUTC. We're talking about transport now in a more wider sense. And we also have with us the chairman of the Transport Authority, Owen Ellington, who is also holding the dual role at this point as the acting director of the JUTC, the acting managing director, rather, of the JUTC. Minister, you were making a point. You can continue.
No, the other thing is that what we have had in the past is that we buy buses, and buses have a lifespan. And we have made the lifespan expire and not refurbished the buses. So there's a refurbishing program now for both the articulated buses and also the regular buses, because the fact of the matter is that if you refurbish them within the life cycle, which is anywhere between 7 and 10 years, depending on the mileage, especially for Jamaica, and you refurbish them during that period at the end of life, you spend about 30% of the cost of a new bus, and you get another 5 to 7 years of the bus with warranties by the same manufacturer that built the buses. So we have done that with the Volvo articulated buses. We have 5 that are being done now. We should have them rolled out by March, and we have done 28 for the hill routes
20.
with the Golden Dragon buses, and another 16 that are now currently as we speak. For the Volvo, we have to go to Cabinet on Monday for 30, of which 5 can be done immediately, and the rest would have to be done in the new budget year. There's financing for it. So it's not just about ordering buses and increasing buses and increasing your fleet with newer models. The average age of the JUTC fleet when I came in was between 12 and 15 years old. Now, as I said to you, out of the 300 buses that we're rolling out, we are 175 new buses out of 300. That is unprecedented. I think the last time that would have happened is when we bought the Volvo buses back in 2014 or 2012, right? I can't remember.
2012, I think.
But I'm just saying to you that it's a holistic approach. It's a business-like approach in terms of looking at all of the aspects of the entity to make sure that, A, we save as much as we can, knowing that we have to do subsidies to allow for the people to move around, which is, not uncommon. That is public transportation around the world that's run by government. But as I said before, the issue is that at the end of the day, we need to get a transport system that moves people efficiently, safely. People can go on their app and know exactly when the next bus is coming using technology, so they can time and plan their business, and most importantly, move on to a rural school bus system, which we have already gone to Cabinet. They have given us directions. We're coming back because that is heavy subsidy. But the fact is that it's possible. And I hope that I'll be there to see it through to finality.
Minister, one of the things brought up by your opposition counterpart is the 450 buses that are required, that is specific for the KMTR, right? The rollout to satisfy the demand in the KMTR specifically.
So you're saying that my counterpart is saying we need 450?
No, my question is, before I get into it, but I want to just understand it as a base principle that the 450 we talk about as the most efficient number of buses that is specific to the KMTR.
Well, put it this way, that would have been obviously yes, based on where JUTC was servicing before I became minister. The fact of the matter is that I'm not sure that 450 number was properly spec'd out in terms of the routes, the improved routes, the increased routes, and most importantly, the efficiency of the operation of the JUTC, which I think once you have the efficiency and you improve it, then you are able to move buses around at different times of the day, and you would need to actually have 450 buses necessarily.
Okay, because
you have Pico in the morning, Pico in the evening, and during the day, you improvise and move the buses. Similar to what I've told them. In the morning, they have set routes. Every morning is a different morning. Every evening is a different evening. So if you go to halfway through in the evening and you realize that there's a shift in terms of the loads that are being required for whatever reason, then you shift the buses. It's not hard and fast that you have a bus, what they call it, number 30 route that plies Kingston to Papine, halfway through to Papine, and because that is there and there's nobody taking up that bus on that particular morning, that you can shift it and move it and to another area in the park, in the center, that requires relief. So it's all about management. To me, it's all about management, and that is what we're trying to put in. And as I said before, I think that every person that is reasonable and rational will say when the call is over that absolutely there's an improvement, and there's room for much more improvement, and that's what I'm about.
I asked that, Minister, because when you look to expand into other parishes, and I would like you to challenge the point by Mr. Phillips that you should satisfy the demand where it exists now based on the lack of necessary buses to fulfill that demand before you seek to expand further on a very
100%.
very limited fleet.
100%, and I want to give every commuter my undertaking tonight that I am not going to expand into other areas unless that I'm fully satisfied that the routes that were misery index routes within the areas that JUTC served before are properly manned and serviced to bring the wait time zone to international standards, which is 45 minutes to an hour maximum. So any day that is not happening, with the next round of buses that are underway, then we will revamp and relook to make sure that we are offering efficiency on every route that we serve rather than just opening routes. And then, of course, we end up in the same position where certain routes are waiting extended periods for bus service.
Final one from me, Minister, being posed to you from a listener asking when that app will go live where they can track the movement of buses, arrival times and schedule.
Well, I'm telling you something, if it doesn't happen within the next month or two, somebody's going to answer to me, because the buses are equipped specifically, especially the new buses, and there's no reason why that technology cannot be implemented as was designed by the bus, spec by the bus. So
I can tell you, Minister, gentlemen, that it is partially implemented, only accessible now to Apple iPhone users. It's hopefully in due time it will be available to those who are using other devices. But we are working on building out all the smart features so that they can be accessible to our commuters. So it's a work in progress.
And that is the most important part, because as you know, the importance of technology, and the fact of the matter is that people would not have to go to the depot or to the bus stop or to the transport center and sit there or stand there for an hour and a half, because they'll be able to know exactly the movements, where the bus is, and what is the next time that it is expected to reach there. And I will stop at nothing to make sure that that is implemented. And in fairness, should have been implemented already. And I'm not happy about it.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Transport Minister Darrell Vaz, Owen Ellington, the chairman of the Transport Authority, also the acting managing director of the JUTC. Thanks as always.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it. Amen.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers. We turn now over to Trinidad, where journalist Ryan Bechu has launched his first novel, An Unending Search. Mr. Bechu is the senior reporter at CNC3 News in Trinidad and Tobago. The book tells the story of Tar, a teenager working in the cane fields alongside his wise and influential uncle Sundar, as radio opens their ears to global events through the BBC World Service. As Uncle Sundar instills in Tar the determination to escape the grip of poverty and systemic racism, the novel takes readers on a powerful journey of hope, ambition, and identity, with Tar setting his sights on New York or London. Through Tar's eyes, Bechu masterfully confronts issues of racism, classism, and societal divides, painting a vivid picture of life and struggles in 1970s Trinidad while exploring the universal themes of growth and self-discovery. Mr. Bechu joins us now to discuss the themes of his book. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. Truly appreciate it. Good evening to your audience as well.
It's nice to hear from you. So just to give us a rundown at the first thing, An Unending Search. What instilled that title? What inspired that title?
It's about this young man, as you just briefly outlined in the synopsis, about this young East Indian teenager who is on a search for to get out of Trinidad, to get out of the Caribbean, to get to greener pastures such as New York and London, where he perhaps will find a better life, perhaps find more job opportunities. And in this search, he encounters many obstacles, including racism, classism. He struggles through many of these challenges, and it's really a search that when you get to the end of the book, you'd realize that he continues to search for something. He hasn't found that peace. He hasn't found that destination that he had hoped to achieve.
Interesting. So it's an allegory for life, essentially. That's unending search for a better life that would typify a lot of people growing up in the Caribbean, particularly in Trinidad and Jamaica as well.
Precisely. It really is an accurate reflection of life in the Caribbean, and that's why the book itself has taken the genre of a West Indian fiction, because it really follows stories, everyday stories that people can relate to from Jamaica, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana. Wherever you live in the region, you'd be able to very much connect with the story of searching for something. We've all grown up in small islands. Jamaica is a much bigger island than many of the islands that we have in the region. But still, many of us have grown up in very small countries, and we're always searching for something much bigger than ourselves, something much bigger than our islands.
It's a work of fiction, but you use real life things such as the BBC World Service. So I imagine that there is some inspiration in terms of parallels being drawn to real life stories that you may have heard or have been privy to over the years.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. I think that while the book is very much fiction, all the characters are fiction, many of the stories are almost all the stories are fiction. You're very right in saying that the stories and the story itself have been influenced by my experiences growing up in not just Trinidad and Tobago, but traveling to places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, traveling to places like Dominica and seeing the parallels of life in the Caribbean islands. So yes, many of the stories and the ultimate story of this book have been shaped by my experiences of living on the island and watching. I always say we in the Caribbean have so many characters. There are characters everywhere, but we have such interesting characters on a day-to-day basis in our workplaces, on the streets, the homeless people. If you look hard enough and you analyze it hard enough, they make you laugh, they make you cry, they make you wonder. And all of these characters will be wasted if they're not put into a book, if they're not put into a play. So I think we have literature bursting on the streets of the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. Is this your first book?
It's my first book.
Mm-hmm. And what was that experience like in terms of the actual process of writing?
Hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I started this book in 2009, finished the first draft in 2014. Back then I didn't have the money to have it properly copy edited. I also didn't think that it was very good. I didn't think it was good enough, so I just left it there. And then in 2023, I picked it back up again, and I took it to a copy editor and had her have a look at it. And when she had a look at it, she said, well, first of all, the book is too long. It was double the size that it was right now, so that would have been roughly about 500 pages. So she asked me to cut the book in half, and then when I cut the book in half, we had a lot of changes to do. Honestly, it was like writing a second book. It felt like I wrote two books. It felt like I wrote the first draft was one book, and then this second book was entirely different, with different characters, different names, different storylines, because it really did show me how much I matured as both a writer and a person in that 10 years in between putting down that first draft and then picking it back up again.
What compelled you to take it back up again after, as you said, nearly a decade?
I've never lost my love for West Indian literature. I think as I became older as a journalist, I read a lot less, which was unfortunate because when I was growing up in my teenage years, I read a lot of West Indian literature, and I didn't only read, Naipaul and Walcott from St. Lucia, but I also read a lot, of Marlon James as well. I read a lot of Nalo Hopkinson as well. So, I always stayed very close to West Indian writers. I kept in touch. I had the honor of interviewing Marlon James a few years after he won the Man Booker Prize. I also had the opportunity to interview as a journalist Nalo Hopkinson when she traveled to Trinidad for the Bocas Literature Festival. So I always stayed very close to West Indian literature and West Indian writers. And, it always stayed at the back of my mind that this was something that I wanted to get done. I was just waiting on the right time. And I picked it back up again and, and just decided to go through the process. I didn't realize that the process would be that painstaking.
Mm-hmm. And having gone through that process, should we expect that you'll take up your pen again?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know if I have a second book in me, but, I wouldn't mind, but it's definitely, I think experience when you're writing a novel or when you're writing any book, really, experience is very important. And I think the experience of the first book will certainly make the second book, somewhat less challenging. Not easier, but less challenging.
I tell you something, you said earlier that, you think there are a lot of stories in the Caribbean to be told. And I'm always happy when Caribbean nationals and natives tell those stories. How do people find the book?
So right now it's available throughout Trinidad and Tobago, but we are working feverishly on having it on Amazon as well as online and then Kindle as well, and that will be very soon. And I do hope that, particularly West Indian people will be able to, reinvigorate that. I'll tell you a very quick story before on our way out, because a couple of weeks ago, while I was in the process of publishing this book, someone said to me, and he was actually a quite distinguished person within the publishing fraternity, locally anyway, he said to me, the people of the region and publishers don't really have a taste for West Indian literature anymore. Mm-hmm. That was the taste of the 60s and 70s on the back of Windrush. And, and I kind of understood where he was coming from, but I also, I also want to say that, not because West Indian literature might be out of fashion these days, doesn't mean that we don't have to, or we can't write it. I'm a West Indian. I love the West Indies. I love West Indian literature, and I didn't write the book to win a Nobel Prize in literature. I wrote the book out of a passion and a love for West Indian literature. Mm-hmm. So I think that we are. We telling our own stories, as you say it, in our language, that was very important to me, and I was happy that I was able to, contribute a little piece to the history of West Indian literature.
The book is set in the 1970s. Do you believe there's enough cross-generational experiences that could essentially compel someone, even in the younger generations now in the 2000s, now in 2025, to understand the struggles and the woes that many people faced in the 1970s, and they could draw parallels to them, to their lives now in the 21st century?
I hope so. I really hope so. On the one hand, I hope that they do have an appreciation, because the book is set right after the Black Power marches and movement in the early 1970s here in Trinidad, and the remnants of that Black Power movement linger throughout that decade, and the book sort of looks at the impact that it has on blacks and East Indian people. And what I do hope is that even if they can't completely understand and appreciate what happened in after that Black Power movement, that they can at least draw parallels to the protagonist of the book, who really goes about on a search of escapism from Trinidad and the Caribbean to this promised land, as New York and London have always been for people of the Caribbean. New York and London have always been the promised land. You know, you go there, you get a better job, you find a better life, etc. I hope that they could find parallels in this protagonist, about his unending search for a better life and the struggles that he had to endure with their own struggles and with their own lives. And at the end of it, things didn't work out for him. And they could also see, if things don't work out for them either, that sometimes things just don't work out.
Yeah. Ryan Bechu, thank you so much for your time. All the best.
Appreciate it as always, and appreciate talking to you in a different capacity tonight.
All right, my brother. Senior reporter there at CNC3 News in Trinidad and Tobago, Ryan Bechu. His new book will be available soon on Amazon and on Ending Search. It's amazing that we are, as West Indian people, we're such good storytellers. Like, we love to tell stories. Just any given day, Dana comes into my section and she has a story. but I don't think we record in terms of writing or even in film.
Or it's fallen out of favor.
Was it ever in favor?
Well, if you go back to the times of Miss Louise Bennett...
But even that, a lot of that is still oral. A lot of that is oral. I'm just, in terms of the writing. We should do more of the writing.
I agree. The West Indies and just this region, it's such a melting pot of ideas, ideologies, politics, sports, that there's many tales to be told. For example, the one that is more known for many outside of the region is the tale of Usain Bolt, coming from humble beginnings to being the fastest man in the world. Shelley Ann Fraser, she has a tale to tell as well. But there are other individuals that require recognition for where they've come from in terms of humble beginnings here in the Caribbean region to becoming global players. And I don't think we do enough justice to that in terms of telling those stories and just struggles of being in the Caribbean region.
Do you have a favorite West Indian novel?
I wouldn't say it was my favorite West Indian novel because it was a collection of poets by Derek Walcott. His collection of poetry. That would be, it's not a novel, but it was my favorite.
Yeah. I think I liked A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid.